Sorry. Sorry. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jenelle Riley. I am so happy to have you here today with a SAG-AFTRA Foundation conversation with a actor, writer, director, producer, scholar who is truly one of a kind. Since his breakthrough turn in Freaks and Geeks, this is an actor who has continued to defy expectations and typecasting with a wide range of performance in every genre. He is, of course, an Academy Award nominee for his work in 127 Hours, a Golden Globe winner for James Dean, and a 3-time Emmy and SAG Award nominee. Starting this week, you can see him in the performance of his career as the disaster artist. Please welcome James Franco.
The actors! My kind of crowd. Thank you. I'm honored, thank you.
I was just telling you backstage, I was a little worried because I know that the disaster artist isn't out and I didn't want to spoil anything, but how many people have
think
seen
they
it?
kind of get the deal.
Yeah, I got the impression more people had seen it than I realized before. Probably came to a SAG screening.
How many have seen The Room?
Yeah!
All right.
That surprises me. How many of you auditioned for The Room?
That guy right there.
Well, as I've mentioned, this is an audience of SAG actors, so I always like to start by asking, how did you get your SAG card?
My SAG card, let's see. I came out to LA to go to UCLA, and I was in the English department. I dropped out after a year, and my parents said, well, we're not gonna support you anymore if you don't go to school. I was like, oh, okay. And I tried to get a restaurant job. I couldn't get a restaurant job, and so then I went and worked at McDonald's, and I was working at McDonald's at the drive-thru from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. over in Sherman Oaks on Ventura.
Oh, I know that one well.
Yeah. Kevin Connolly used to come through, Gina Davis, yeah.
What did Gina Davis order?
What did she order? She came late. I want to say Big Mac, but we're talking like almost 20 years ago.
You heard it here.
And then I booked a commercial while I was there. I booked a commercial for a Pizza Hut commercial. It was for the Super Bowl, and it was sort of like they had the new deep dish pizza, and so the gist of the commercial was there a bunch of guys in a parking lot. They're like, "You heard the news that Elvis is down at Pizza Hut serving a deep dish pizza," and we're all like skeptical. We're like, "Yeah, right. They don't serve deep dish at Pizza Hut." And cut to like a CG Elvis like singing and dancing with pizzas at Pizza Hut. Yeah. So,
wait a minute. Was there any conflict?
that's how I got it. Tommy Wiseau also got a SAG card from a commercial, but he had to pay. He paid for it. You can get it online. I think he's actually altered it because it was even kind of crazier before, but it was for his denim, his Levi's outlet called Street Fashions. And I'll give you a little deep lore about Greg and Tommy. Greg had actually done one movie before The Room, Greg Sestero, called Retro Puppet Master. Now, you know me, if you're gonna quickly realize that I just give like the longest answers, and my girlfriend was complaining about it last night. It's gonna be all over. So there's a connection between me and Greg and Retro Puppet Master. In the book, he says, and this was long before I got the rights to it, the disaster artist, he said, I got this movie, Retro Puppet Master. The director told me that a young James Franco had auditioned for this and didn't get it. And so I guess Greg Sestero beat me out for one role. Yeah, so when you ask who auditioned for The Room, I didn't do that. I auditioned for the one movie that's like worse than The Room, Retro Puppet Master, and didn't get it. Anyway, when Greg did that, Tommy, it didn't do very well, or maybe it did well on like weird video circuit, but Tommy he watched it incessantly, and Greg, we actually had a sequence in our movie that we cut out with all of this, and it's like, there's one scene of Greg walking down these, circular stairs with a candelabra, and it's just, really cheesy and silly, and he's scared of the little puppets that are gonna murder him. And Tommy, he's like, this is my favorite scene. And Greg's like, that scene? I'm walking down the stairs. It's with a candelabra. It's nothing. He's like, no, this great scene, a really great atmosphere. I like this. And so then, boom, next thing Greg knows, Tommy's like, hey, I got into the SAG. And he's like, what? He's like, look, this commercial I do. And it's Tommy with like a Renaissance hat on his head, and he's going, and he's coming down the stairs with a candelabra, and he's like, to be or not to be, that's the question. Come to Street Fashion, 555 in San Francisco.
Oh my God.
And that was like that was the first thing we shot on the Disaster Artist. It was like day 0. We had like an extra little bonus day in the beginning in pre-production. It was really to test out the prosthetics. And so I was doing that and like doing it exact, like watching Tommy and then doing it, you know, and it was the first time that Seth Rogen saw me in the whole getup.
Yeah.
He could not, I mean, that whole day he was just destroyed. He could not stop laughing. Like it was so weird for him. It took him 3 more days, and those were days he had to act in, but like that first day, he just, every time he's just, no.
The good news is Seth has a very quiet laugh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they had to take him off set,
I'm curious, doing a Pizza Hut commercial, was there like a conflict of interest that you were working at McDonald's, or did you leave?
No, that was it. I was done.
You're done, okay.
Done. That was, from that point on, I fortunately could support myself as an actor. Yeah.
I actually had McDonald's today in your honor, and I was thinking, no, I really did. Because
I've had it maybe twice since then.
Really?
I mean, I don't know, road trips.
But it made me think of you because didn't you would practice voices on the intercom? Is that true?
Yeah, I did accents, and none of them were successful, except I did like a kind of a Brooklyn, or my idea of a Brooklyn accent, and that one kind of lasted. I remember Titanic came out while I was working at McDonald's, and this young woman came through, and she was like, hey, you know, wow, you work at McDonald's, you know, you ever want to go out or whatever? I was like, yeah, let's, you know, I'll meet you here and in the parking lot. We'll go see Titanic or whatever. And I kept it up. I was like, wow, that Leo, hey, you know, and I kept it going. It was so bad. I mean, it must have been horrible, but I kept it going, and then she dropped me back off at the McDonald's parking lot. We maybe had like a little kiss or something, and then not long after that, she would call me, and I'd answer the phone and be like, hello, and she'd be like, James? I'd be like, oh, hey, what's up? You know, and I was just like, this is ridiculous. I can't keep it going, and I was like, hey, I gotta break something to you, you know, and I was like, I'm not from New York, I'm from Palo Alto. and there was like silence on the phone. It was like she had been out with a stranger, you know, and I'm like, look, everything I told you is real except the New York part, like that's not. And it was just done. Yeah, it was done. It was like I was like Jeffrey Dahmer or something. It was like, yeah. But that was the one accent that I'm using now. On the Deuce, I play these twins that are, yeah. The other accents, like when I did German or Italian, they probably actually, now that I think about it, they were probably just preparation for Tommy. Because like, now I can't do any accent without the Tommy accent just like infecting it.
It's insidious.
Like, this is my German accent, this is my French accent, this is my New Orleans accent, yeah.
So I'm curious, going back to your childhood, did you always know you wanted to be an actor? Or if you went to college for something else, did it take you a while?
I always loved movies. The first play I ever did, if you want to go away, here's a potentially rambling story that I'll try to cut short. We did like Winnie the Pooh, I think, in 2nd grade. I played Eeyore.
No.
And then I remember, and then we did Romeo and Juliet when I was in 5th grade. I did not get Romeo. I was very upset about that. And then in 7th grade, I wrote a play with a friend. It was like a mime play, and we were like golfers, and it was like everything bad that could happen. Like we'd go like, and then it'd be like, and it like it came back at us, and you know, that was basically it. I just did my whole show right there, and then when I was in high school is when I sort of, you know, and I loved movies. You know, I think the first movie I ever went to was in the theater was The Dark Crystal, and then my parents would take me to all the Spielberg films and all that kind of stuff. And then in high school, I really that's when I got into James Dean and Marlon Brando, and my mom loved film, so she got me into, you know, I don't know, Annie Hall, and then I found like the Gus Van Sant movies, like My Own Private Idaho and Drugstore Cowboy, and so I knew I wanted to be a part of that, or even younger, like Stand By Me and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's amazing. I want to be a part of that. I don't know how that works, or, you know, like, because there was nothing around. And like in Palo Alto, they had the Children's Theater. I also remember being like really jealous of the kids like doing Oliver and stuff at the Children's Theater. I don't know why I didn't join. I guess I was just shy or something. And then I finally started in my senior year. And I've told this story before, but I had a girlfriend, Jasmine, who had been asked to do a one act by this guy, Yoav Fisher. He wrote the one act. I never read it. All I had heard was that he was directing it, and it was romantic. And of all the people, he'd asked Jasmine to be in it, and so as a, you know, insecure, you know, 17-year-old, I was like, don't do it, please. Thinking like I was jealous that they were gonna possibly kiss or something in the play, but in hindsight, I realized I was just jealous because this guy had like written it, he's directing it, and he's acting, he's like doing everything that I wanna do. And so sort of as revenge or whatever, I was like, all right, well, I'll show you. I'm going to join the drama group, and that's when I joined. And I realized up until then there had been a lot of fear. There's a great, I had just read, I don't have my phone on me, but I had just read this, the intro from Greg's book, The Disaster Artist, at the Gotham Awards. And one of the things he says in there, he's like, the room has now been a part of my life for so long. I look at it so differently now. I thought it was just a bad movie. Now, to me, it's sort of a testament of, you know, self-will, of continuing in the face of rejection, and that there might, you know, sometimes in life we are just too self-aware, too scared to really give something a shot. And that described me to a T, before. And so I kind of needed that. I just needed that little burr under the saddle to get me in there, and so that's what it was. And then my senior year, my drama teacher was very, avant-garde. We did a German play called Wojciech by George Buchner, and I played Wojciech. And
what is the school that you went to?
Palo Alto High. Now you look at it, oh my God, like, because I was in class with Lisa Brendan Jobs, Steve Jobs' daughter, the one that's like featured in the movie, and then the Hewletts, one of the grandson of the Hewletts of Hewlett and Packard was there, and then my journalism teacher, they just did a profile of her and her family in the New York Times. Her daughter was married to Sergey Brin from Google. So like Palo Alto High, I don't know if it's all Google money or what, but it like, they have a journalism building there that's like better than the J School at Columbia or something.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, it was a crazy school. Anyway, I told you I ramble. So anyway, what was the question?
Actually, I was going to ask, was your mother an actress? I heard that she had...
My parents met at Stanford. My mom grew up in Shaker Heights, and my dad grew up in Glencoe, Illinois. They met at Stanford in painting class, and my father then gave it up for various reasons, went to business school at Harvard, and then they moved back because they loved Palo Alto so much. So I grew up there, and my mother became a children's book author.
after I started acting, so they said, we're not going to pay for you as an actor. I was like, fine, whatever, and I'll do it anyway. And it was one of the reasons, too, I worked so hard. Here I am working at McDonald's, the drive-thru, and just feeling like, wow, you made this choice, James, UCLA, drive-thru at McDonald's, you better work hard at your acting. I did. That's all I did, besides, serve hamburgers. And then I got on Freaks and Geeks eventually, and then I had a career. She then started taking acting classes 10 years after I started acting in Palo Alto at this. And I'm like, come on, Ma. And she's like, it was really sweet on the other hand. And she had an improv group in Palo Alto called Suburban Squirrel. And they put on shows. And then eventually as an experiment, I went on to General Hospital. Mm-hmm. And after doing General Hospital for a while, it got very meta. My character was named Franco and all this stuff. And there were references to me. And the guy was like, hey, maybe it was my idea, I don't know. We were like, oh, what if your mom, or he had heard that she was doing Suburban Squirrel. He's like, what if your mom came and played your real mom? And I was like, yes, that's great. Here's the thing though, I wasn't hard on her. It was just that she was so weird when we were on the show together.
Yeah. It's your mom.
Because she's playing my mom.
Yeah.
She's playing a woman who, was, grew up in the 60s, as my mom did, So she's sort of a hippie, the character, I guess. And so you'd think, the writing's, is what it is, but, you'd think she'd know how to play that character. It's her. And she did it, she was so weird. I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? Because she'd be like this kind of thing, Mom, what are you doing? Making weird noises, what do you mean? I'm like, Mom, what are you, why are you doing that? That's not. And she had obviously, I think she had really worked on it and everything. And since then, so I pointed it out to her. I was like, Mom, you don't have to add all that weird stuff. And I think she learned. I put her in other things. So
you did? Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. So and she got a lot better.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And now actually we did do a high school class together. So now we taught together for a couple of years. We did a film class at Pally, where they made a whole film that was an adaptation of one of her young adult books called The Metamorphosis. Yeah.
That's so
just
cool.
played at the Mill Valley Film Festival.
So I love the Mill Valley Film Festival.
Yeah. It was Metamorphosis and Lady Bird. It was
Which did you go see?
I couldn't make it. I love Lady Bird and I love Metamorphosis, but yeah, Lady Bird's one of the best movies of the year. Yeah.
And I know that you studied with Robert Carnegie. At, how did you find him? Because I know that became a very valuable relationship. Was it just pure luck, or did you find you connected right away?
It's really weird. I hardly looked at any schools in LA. I was at UCLA. I was not in the drama department. I was in the English department. That was sort of the compromise. My dad wanted me to go into mathematics. I wanted to go to, Rhode Island School of Design for Art, and so the compromise was literature at UCLA. And as soon as I got here to LA, I realized, half of the town, is in the movie business, and sort of started putting the pieces together, there are practical steps you can take to become an actor. There was an actor in my dorm, Dykstra, who was on Sybil, the Sybil Shepherd show.
Oh, no
and so
way.
It was sort of you don't, because when I used to watch Stand By Me, I'd think, wow, they're just born into it. I was 14, or I'd be like, well, it's too late for me.
Washed up.
Yeah. I did, and then I saw but then I couldn't apply for the drama program at UCLA until I was a junior, and so there were a couple classes I could apply for, and I remember the teacher there, I think he's still there, Michael Hackett. There was the class I was eligible for was it wasn't even for actors, it was for the directors, but they needed actors to as their clay. And so I auditioned for that, and everybody was doing sonnets. Dude, this is so crazy now that I think about it. It's like my whole future is Tommy and James Dean, was right there. So everyone was doing sonnets, and he's like, all right, now but do it as James Dean.
Wow.
And so I did some sonnet as James Dean. I did not get in the class.
Really?
But cut to 20 years later, I played James Dean and then played this crazy man who quotes sonnets to people that don't want to hear them.
And is obsessed with James Dean.
Yeah, and so I didn't get in there, and I took there was like a extracurricular acting class that met above the pool house at UCLA. And I went there, and it was like trust exercises. It was not great, but it was, whatever. And I met a woman there named Rodanthe, who was in the theater program, and she was like, I'm in the theater program, we don't even get enough acting classes. I want to do another acting class, and we had heard about this place called Playhouse West. So it was like the first place I really went to, and went out there, and it was in the valley, and I didn't even have a car at that point, and Renata would just drive me, and I'd go to Playhouse. I ended up staying there probably way too long. I stayed there like 8 years.
That's not too bad.
No, it's long.
Do you ever go back or take lessons or do brush ups or anything like that?
No, I mean, no. I think one of the reasons I stayed I wanted to be the best actor I could be. I think part of what was going on was when my parents said, we're not going to support you, it was kind of harsh to hear. From one perspective, they were just giving me a lesson, like, this is what you really want to do, okay, then take responsibility for yourself, and so that was actually a good lesson to learn. And once I did do that and got a job at McDonald's, things seemed to work out. On the other hand, it felt like, man, they don't get it. They don't get me. And to their credit too, like by the time my little brother Dave rolled around 7 years later, they were like, my mom was taking acting classes, and they were like, yeah, Dave, you want to act? Yeah, go, act.
Well, yeah, but was part of you like, hey, come on?
Yeah, a little bit. But so when I got to Playhouse, and I didn't have a lot of money, because this is even before McDonald's, Carnegie said, pay what you can, and just write down, what you owe me, and if you make it someday, you can pay me back.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. So that meant a lot. And so it was sort of like he became like an artistic father that I was so hungry for, somebody, an authority figure that would be like, I'm going to support your dream. I'm going to, and so that, I needed that, obviously. And then, so like even after like being on Freaks and Geeks and then winning a Golden Globe for James Dean, all that, I still went back because it was like a safe place for me. And after a while, after like 8 years, it was sort of like, all right, dude, you need to get out of the, you need to get out of the nest. I tried the thing, where I had and this works for a lot of people I respect, having coaches for movies. I tried that, and I just found for me, it wasn't the best situation, and maybe it was just maybe it was personalities involved, I don't know, but it felt like the coach got in the way of my relationship with the director. And so what I just try to do now is I just try to work with directors that I click with, and that's, and director is probably the most important ingredient for anything that I do. And as opposed to how I was when I was a young actor, I didn't really work that way as a young actor, but now it's sort of like, I just view the director as as the coach and as the main collaborator, and I just create characters in conjunction with the director. Like I don't, because I've had the experiences too of like working when I was a young actor, like working like 8 months on a character and doing all this research and stuff, and then going to set and having the director be like, "What? That's not what I wanted," or even like something like learning to ride a horse, like on my own dime, like going to Griffith Park with like these amazing horses, like the horses that were actually used, like Zorro's horse, or you know what I mean, like and these Frisians and stuff like that, and
learning how to do it, and 8 months every day, you know, like I got pretty good.
Yeah.
Like I could, people be like, that's not true, but I could do like, I could stand on its back while it galloped. I have video of it. I don't have it on me. I do have video of it that I will show someday. And then showing up on that shoot, and the script, you know, had all these like descriptions of like battles on horseback, and you know, he rides down the hill at the, you know, head of the charge, and then getting there on set and realizing, oh, those have all been cut. Instead of like big battle on horseback, it's like 6 guys sneak through the woods on foot. It's like, you know what I mean? It was like, oh. I didn't even learn my lesson on that one, but after a while, it's, you know, I learned some lessons really slowly, but after a while it was like, yeah, dude, why don't you just communicate with the director? And then you'll know exactly what is needed for the movie, and you can put your time and focus on that.
What if you are the director, though? Then
well, then you have a better idea of what's going in there. Yeah, exactly. The thing I'll say about that, though, is like, I've directed myself a lot. I direct myself on the Deuce and 2 characters, and it's. I'm comfortable with it. I know how to do it. The key to that is really strong producers, you know, that share your sensibility and share, you know, your taste, and so you can depend on them. And in a way, it becomes, in the best case scenario, like The Deuce with David Simon and Nina Noble and George Pelecanos, and on this with Seth and everybody from Point Grey, it becomes very fluid. And Seth and I were really used to that, because on judge sets where we kind of learned, it is that way. And there is sort of a apprenticeship in it where writers come and everybody sort of can pitch ideas, especially when you're improvising. And so there are people that are sitting behind Judd writing jokes all the time, and Seth and Evan Goldberg were those guys at one point, like on Knocked Up, so that they can watch like firsthand and really learn how to do that, so that when, you know, we got to This Is the End, like, and they were the directors, it didn't feel that much different. It was just like, you know, they had been watching so closely. And so it was sort of the same thing here, where if I'm in front of the camera, Seth kind of knows what I want, or the other producers kind of know what we're going for. And so I don't have to like run back and just, you know, have my eyes on everything or rewatch every take. Like, I know from them that, okay, you got what you wanted, or whatever. The only downside for me about directing myself is that I really love collaborating with actors. It's the best, you know, when you get incredible actors. And it was one of the things that made me want to go and teach, because here's another sidetrack, sorry, but I think it's good stuff. When I was I went to directing school at NYU after I'd been acting for like 12 years. I had Michael Shannon in my shorts. I had Charles Dance, you know, Tyrion Lannister, you know, in my short films at NYU. I was very lucky. And I realized that was a huge lesson for me as a director. It was like, oh, when I get the best actors, I don't have to do that much directing. In fact, I want to kind of get out of the way if I need to, you know, adjust a little bit, but they're going to bring so much already, and stuff that I didn't even think of. And then I was looking at my classmates, and a lot of them, you know, had newer actors in their short films, right? Which is fine, it's understandable, and everybody needs to learn and do all that. But I realized, oh, that might require a bit more handling as a director, and so that maybe they're getting a false sense of how much they actually need to direct and get involved. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to go and teach. After I graduated at NYU, I went back and taught, and I did these classes where they made films. And like the first year, I think Mila Kunis and Jessica Chastain and Zach Braff and, you know, a bunch of great actors were in the film, and the students got the experience of like, oh, this collaboration thing between an actor and a director is really great, you know? So that's what I don't get when I direct myself, just because
a little hard to surprise myself.
You mentioned James Dean, and you also mentioned preparation, and you sort of infamously really delved into preparing for that role.
That's kind of where I learned how to get into a part, and that's a particular character. I've done 8 or 9 characters based on real people. James Dean, as opposed to Aaron Ralston, 127 Hours, was a very public figure. He was an actor. Audiences can go and watch his films, Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden Giant, and see what he, see what he moved like and hear what he sounded like and all that. And in addition, that was a huge part of James Dean's character, right? Like, a lot of people nowadays just, especially those young kids, they just know maybe like him from the posters of the cigarette and the slouch or whatever.
Or from The Room.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, who's that blonde guy? Like, getting so upset on. And so that behavior was a huge component of capturing that character. And so I just learned how to do like the outer behavior, and really it's just basically what I was doing at McDonald's badly, listening to his voice over and over and repeating it back and getting that down. Reading all the, well, I'll talk about the inner life in a second. Watching the movies, when there's specific scenes where he's doing, a very kind of iconic bit of behavior that, is sort of, you could say, James Dean-y, like practicing that over and over. But that's half of it with a character like that in Tommy, where if you just do that, then the danger is it becomes a caricature. So you have to wed it to the inner life. And so you get that wherever you can, right? So James Dean, fortunately, there were like 13 biographies, and his friends were still around. Martin Landau was a good friend of his, and Dizzy Sheridan, who played Seinfeld's mom on Seinfeld, she had been his girlfriend. Yeah, it was funny when I went over to her place, like, and then here's the thing about James Dean. He was so mercurial and just was different with everybody that all the old friends all have a different take on him, and they would get together every once in a while and do interviews and roundtables about him, and they kind of disagree. Mark Rydell, the director, knew him, and they'd all kind of disagree. But I went over to Dizzy Sheridan's, and her book wasn't out yet. She let me read it in her garden, and she started changing. I mean, she must have been in her 60s or 70s,
right,
but she
then, yeah.
suddenly like transformed, because I was still so in James Dean mode, and she started like, I don't know if you could say flirting, but it was almost like she was just like a young woman again. It was really sweet, almost like visited by James Dean again. It was actually really, really sweet. Anyway, so I got to figure out his inner life, and basically the crux, if you could just boil down James Dean, or at least for myself, was he's so close with his mom, lost her when she was 8, and she died, and his dad decided he didn't want to raise him and sent him to live in Indiana with his aunt and uncle. And so at the same time, he lost both parents. Yeah. And so you could see like both this need for love from authority, but also a kind of rebellion against it, because he'd been so hurt. And that's sort of the key to at least 2 of his 3 roles, Rebel and East of Eden. And Kazan, the master, actor's director, probably, keyed into that. Yeah. It was like, I think we even say it in our thing, like, he is Cal, like, he is the guy. And so just figuring all of that out, and having the inner and outer life. And so I figured out how to do that. Now, in other cases, I don't need to do that. In something like, why him? I don't want to say that. It's not me, or like, this is the end, the guy's name's James Franco. It's not me. it's an exaggerated version of me, but like I don't need to like go practice a accent or something like that, or you know what I mean? It's like take what's there and then just kind of make it a little dumber than I am.
Didn't you also, though, and maybe I'm wrong because I shouldn't believe anything I read on the internet, but you took up smoking and you kind of cut yourself off from your friends?
There was back before that internet thing, there was this game called Trivial Pursuit.
Yes.
And one of the Trivial Pursuit questions was, after I did James Dean, was which actor didn't talk to his family or friends for like 3 or 4 months and started smoking to prepare for the role of James Dean or something like that.
No, so is it true?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because I don't want Trivial Pursuit to be proven a liar.
Yeah, it was true. Yeah, and smoking, if you didn't know, is very addictive, kids. It took me about 10 years to quit after that.
Really?
But I quit.
I mean, was that the furthest you think you've
And
ever
now on
gone?
The Deuce, if you watch it,
Oh my
like,
God, yes, you.
every scene I'm smoking, and then when both characters in the scene, it's like double. But they're fake. They're fake cigarettes.
They are fake. I was going to ask.
I don't have the craving. Like, if you stop, I'm sure a lot of you know, if you stop smoking nicotine for a while, then to get back into it takes a little effort because you get lightheaded and everything. It takes some effort. So those things, fortunately, those things don't make me crave nicotine, but I start craving the fake ones. I'm like the only one. Everyone else is like, those are disgusting. But like when I'm directing and acting, you know, in 2 roles on that show, and I'm getting kind of stressed out, like, I'll give me one of the, like off camera, I'm like, give me one of those
The herbal
fake cigarettes.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that's the furthest you ever went to prepare for a role, or was that early on, were you doing that a lot? Like really
That was
going
the
deep?
furthest. I mean, I tried to do it on Freaks and Geeks. Paul Feig tells the story about how all the other kids were just like excited and, you know, and they're probably doing the same thing and they're just like hanging out with each other and all that. Before we shot, I found out that Paul had gone to high school outside of Detroit and that a lot of the stuff in the show was based on him and his experiences outside of Detroit. I don't think they even mention Detroit in the show ever.
No.
They might mention a couple names. I don't know if they say like 8 Mile, but like pretty famous names around that area, but that's about it. So it didn't really matter if I caught the flavor of, you know, the suburbs of Detroit or not, but I went out there, found his high school. It was a summer session, and I went in and found his AV teacher. And he's like, wow. He was almost like Steve Higgins, who plays the AV teacher on the show. He's like, wow, oh yeah, I remember Paul Feig, and yeah, he was great. And I don't know what I got out of that, you know? I don't know how that helped Daniel Desario on that show, but like, you could see that I had the desire to like do as much as I could.
Well, I think obviously James Dean was a big break for you. You won the Golden Globe, as I mentioned. And from there, I know you went on to do Spider-Man, which was probably the biggest movie of your career up to that point.
Yeah, at the time it was at least for opening weekend, it was the biggest box office.
It was also a time when we didn't have so many comic book movies and people weren't sure, you know, if they would do well and if they could be good.
Yeah, Spider-Man 1 and the first X-Men movie was sort of the beginning of this new age of superhero movies that we're in. And we didn't know. People have asked me because of my movie, The Disaster Artist, have you ever been on a movie where you thought it was going to be good or bad and it turned out to be the opposite? I have to say, I just didn't know. Some things I'm just not clear on. So I was like, I remember saying, probably to Kirsten or something, she's like, you think this is going to be good? I was like, no. Like, look at that guy. Like, the stuntman was walking across the stage in the tights, and I'm like, no. Look, it's like Disneyland. This is ridiculous. And yeah.
But did you know when you saw it?
I loved it when I saw it.
Yeah. Because on paper and especially at the time, you couldn't have known it was going to be good, especially as good as it was.
Exactly.
And from there, you've sort of balanced indie movies with, I think it's, well, not that it's an indie movie, but like you did 127 Hours and Pineapple Express pretty closely together. And those are two wildly different movies.
Well, the year that Pineapple came out, I also did Milk.
Yes, exactly.
And that was sort of like it was a great movie.
Yeah.
That was a huge year for me, and those movies, and two movies in particular, were very big for me because that's when I had been doing, I had been like a very dedicated, eager young actor, but I didn't really know how, I just didn't know how it worked. Mm-hmm. I'd been taught in a certain way that was not the best. Like, I'd been taught like there were no actors, directors around, and like, that you have to fight for your performance, and it just set up this horrible, contentious relationship on a lot of the sets I was on. Not everyone, like James Dean, Mark Riddell understood. He,
mm-hmm.
He was also an actor. He knew how to handle this like strange young person. But and others, I was the problem, and not for any other reason than I was trying to do a good job. I just didn't understand how to work with others. I'll let Tommy Wiseau. And the year I did Pineapple and Milk, Milk, was directed by Gus Van Sant. Like I said, he'd been a hero of mine before I wasn't even an actor. And then Sean Penn, who was also one of my heroes. And then Pineapple came about because I ran into Judd at the Austin Film Festival, and he had just come out with 40-Year-Old Virgin. And it's hard to think of a time when like there wasn't a Judd Apatow as we know him now, but like Freaks and Geeks got canceled, mm-hmm. and Undeclared got canceled.
And so, Stiller Show canceled.
Yeah, and so exactly. So the 40-Year-Old Virgin, I remember him saying that day, he's like, I finally, they finally like me. I got a hit. And he's like, I don't know why you left the comedy world after Freaks and Geeks. Come back to comedy. I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to come back. Like, I'm not having a good time. And he's like, well, Seth's gonna do this movie with me knocked up, and then you guys should do a movie. And we didn't even know that it was gonna be Pineapple at that point. He was just like, you should do something with Seth. And I was like, yes, anything, I'm in. And so on that movie, Pineapple, strange to say, of all the movies in my career, but I really learned how to trust on that movie. And because it was my friends, and I thought they were the funniest guys around, and so I just turned myself over to the process of that, and it was one of the best lessons I could have learned.
It hadn't occurred to me, but I guess you hadn't really been doing comedy
up
until then, because you're so. Do you think you were taking yourself too seriously, or it was just the roles that were?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I thinking about The Disaster Artist, sort of thinking about like the trajectory of my career and how you sort of have some control over it, and in other ways you don't, and then things happen to you that pull you in different directions, and a lot of time you're not even aware of it, while it's happening. But I realized, when I was young, even before I was acting, like my heroes were more dramatic actors. James Dean and Brando, like Tommy Wiseau's heroes as well, and then at age 20, 21, I did Freaks and Geeks. And that's still a very formative time in my career. It was the first real job I ever did. And it's a formative time in anyone's life, too. Your brain's still growing, I think. And so I kind of got pulled away from the dramatic thing and went there, and the universe or whatever was like, no, maybe you should just try this out. And so that kind of grew, and that sort of became part of my palette, comedy. But then after it ended, I was like, no, I'm dramatic. I'm going over here. Yeah. And then I played James Dean, and then I did a series of dramas that I don't want to say anything bad about them, but I just didn't have a great experience on them. And then I ran into Judd again, and it was like, no, come over here. But then that year that I did Milk and Pineapple was sort of indicative of what happened with my career from that point. It was sort of like, oh yeah, I'll do comedies, and then I'll also do these dramas, and
And soap operas and
yeah, then all this other
branched
stuff.
off,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's all other weirdness, weird branch of the tree that's like.
But you probably wouldn't have done that.
What?
I'm thinking you might not have done General Hospital had it not been for your foray into comedy with Pineapple Express. You were so set on this dramatic path.
That was sort of came out of like the artistic, path that I was like on. Also because I wasn't satisfied with where my career was going as an actor, and so I was like, I want to try other things, and that just came out of a conversation I had with an artist friend. It was like, what if you were really on a soap opera? And I was like, oh yeah, we can make that happen, and and that whatever. That opened up all these other things, and it was like, oh, what if you were the host of the Oscars? Yeah, good idea. Not so much.
No,
but,
I know. I have to say.
Anyway.
No, wait. I know someone who was in the room that night and said, in the room, you guys were killing, and they were shocked later when people didn't like the show.
I mean, I'll take any blame for whatever happened. There is a interesting phenomenon, I think, that happens in that show for any future host that will definitely not be me, but for any future host, there is a weird phenomenon where things that play in the room don't necessarily play, onto TV.
Yeah.
And the producer came up to me, Bruce Cohen, after. He's like, yeah, Spielberg said it was one of the best. And I was like, oh, okay. And then only afterwards was it like this onslaught. I was like, oh, I like holed up in a hotel in New Haven for a week, and it was just like punishment. Just like I had a couple classes. I was still in school at that time. I had a couple classes, but other than that, I didn't leave. And it was like room service and reading all the criticism. It was just like,
why would you do that?
I don't know.
I mean, it is the world's most thankless gig. Anyone who's done it will tell you that.
I think if you're, I never dreamed of doing that. I never wanted to do that, It was just, I was sort of in that experimental mode, and they came and asked me, and I was just like, yeah. They didn't expect me on General Hospital. They didn't expect me here.
Yeah.
Maybe something interesting will happen. Well, kind of the opposite happened. But
Also, if someone asks you, why not? You kind of have to. Yeah.
Hey, look, it's part of my journey. It's part of my. You learn from everything. I know that I wouldn't be in the place I am now if I hadn't okay, that's too far in that direction.
Yeah.
Don't do that stuff anymore. Find something else to do.
It is interesting.
But
though,
if you're like
because-
Steve Martin,
sure.
who's the best at that, and he put my friend Adam Shakeman produced that year that Alec and Steve did it, which is arguably one of the best of the recent past few decades. They put in so much time.
That's the other
my
thing.
attitude was, I never wanted to be the host. I don't need to write jokes. You guys do it for me. I'll just fall into the mold that you want. I'll go along with the program. I have no, horse in this race. I'm happy. I'm a vessel.
Yeah.
That was sort of my attitude. It's just not the right attitude to have. You need to go in. You need to go into that and be like, I really want to do this, and I want to, put my stamp on it.
Yeah. I can vouch, though, that many people who were actually there were like, no, I thought they were killing in the room, and then, they were surprised by the response, too.
I don't know who thought that. Somebody in the nosebleed was like, I think it's good. Seems good.
It was actually a winner that night who told me that. I'll tell you later. Before we move on to the disaster artist, actually, I think I'm just going to hit on everything uncomfortable that I can. I just want to bring up the interview.
Sure.
Which is a movie.
Oh, we can talk about that.
Oh, I freaking love that movie.
It's a good movie.
It is so fun. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, you got Eminem to come out in the first 5 minutes.
That scene is a piece of incredible.
It's amazing. He's great in it, by the way.
He is. I'll tell a little story about Eminem. He's a great guy, at least from my experience of him. He was so serious. I think he was really trying, really hard.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't laugh. He's like this. He wouldn't smile. He not only wouldn't laugh, he wouldn't smile. But it was really funny, what we were doing. And I warned him, as I warned everybody that, interacted with my character, Skylark, I was like, all right, Marshall, like, I'm just gonna be really stupid. Like, if I say some stupid stuff, don't do anything. And he's like, yeah, all good. I remember, and then I actually said that to, what's her name? Anyway, I said it to another person. She was like, you say something wrong, I'm gonna slap you or something like that. I was like, okay. So, anyway, so he was really serious, and I kept, it was really funny, and he would laugh, but he wouldn't smile, so it was like this, because he was so serious. I'm not exaggerating. It's like, I thought he was like in pain or something at first. It's like, I'd be like, so my man, are you, are you gay? and the whole time like that. And Seth and I were like, dude, what's so serious?
Yeah.
Like, and it was like Eminem, like we never got it. We're like, Eminem here, but he's not laughing. What's that laugh? So then finally at the end, Seth came over to give some direction, and Eminem was like, Seth, can you tell me something? Am I coming off like I'm being too goofy? Seth looks at me, he's like, no. Don't worry about that.
You're good.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's kind of become funny in retrospect, everything that went down with, a Korean dictator threatening you and the Sony leak, but at the time, I mean, were you genuinely scared? I would have been terrified.
I probably should have been more scared than I was. I mean, they gave us a bodyguard. I stayed at some secure hotel for a while. But they said, like, the Koreans are really good hackers. They said this month.
Really?
They said this months before, in August, when the trailer came out.
Oh my God.
And there was like a weird response to that.
Yeah.
As if like Obama had made the trailer. It was like a really weird, they're like, and beware, Mr. Obama, there are people in your country that don't like you. And it's like, Obama didn't make this movie? What are you? But they're like, watch out, have your accountant watch your accounts and keep an eye on your accounts because they're really good hackers. Yeah.
Wow.
And cut to, 5 months later, and Sony got hacked. But as far as somebody coming after me, I wasn't worried about that. It didn't seem like, I don't know, it didn't seem like they'd let anybody out of their country to come get.
Well, I mean more that you would be hacked or,
Yeah, I mean, I took all my personal photos off my computer just in case,
And then where did you put them?
I think they're on a hard drive or.
It's so funny, the thoughts that are running through my head. Because because I remember you guys made jokes about it on Saturday Night Live, and it was very funny, and you were good sports about it.
Yeah, that's when it all came down.
Yeah, but part of me was really like genuinely worried about you guys.
Yeah, I mean, after a while, we didn't know what was gonna happen. They weren't telling us anymore.
Yeah.
It was out of the theaters, and then.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You worked really hard on this movie. Did you worry it would never be seen?
Yeah, it was funny. Yeah, we were worried about. We were more worried about that. We're like, we want people to see this movie, and then it became this weird thing. I was home for he was supposed to come out on Christmas Day, and we still didn't know for a while what was going to happen, and it was sort of on the news every morning. I was staying at this hotel in Palo Alto, and my grandma was staying there, and we'd have breakfast in the morning, and it'd be on the news, and be different things, and then I remember Obama coming on, and he's like, and he said it after it had been pulled from theaters, sadly, but he's like, no, it should be shown in theaters. We should not be intimidated. And this is a fun movie. You know, I love Seth Rogen and I love James Flacco. I was like, no! I've told this story a few times, hoping he hears when it as if he's going to listen to a SAG interview. Like, hoping he hears it and comes out and be like, all right, James, I'm sorry I got the name wrong.
Oh, man. You would think somebody with that name would know to pronounce other people's names right.
I think there's like some athlete named James Flacco.
Oh, really?
Like that, yeah.
Well, he got a nice boost from you then, I guess. So I do want to move on to The Disaster Artist because I could talk about this movie for hours. And I was surprised to learn you were not like an initial fan of The Room, like so many people who were fanatical.
Yeah, it wasn't that I wasn't a fan. It just somehow did not penetrate my consciousness. And I remember, you know, you and I were at the Actors on Actors thing, and I was talking to Gary Oldman backstage, and I was describing it to him. I was describing the billboard. That's all I knew, the billboard that was on Highland. And I just showed that. I was just telling it to somebody in the airport, and an old friend of mine that I ran into, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that thing. I thought that was like a wanted poster." Because there's like a phone number on it.
Yeah.
And I guess, and I thought it was like Angeline, you know,
Same
like
here.
call that number and you get, you know, a vampire in your movie or something like that.
No, he's an all-American guy.
Yeah, yeah. And I was describing it to Gary Oldman, and I saw the light bulb go off, and he was like, "Oh, that bloody thing! I remember that thing. Yeah, that's what your movie's about, that thing." And he's like, "That just sat on the edge of my consciousness for years." So that's all I knew of The Room. I found out later, like Jonah Hill and Paul Rudd and Kristen Bell, like were religious, you know, viewers of The Room, and would go to the Sunset Five. And I'm like, why don't you tell me? Why don't you let me in? But I just never caught on. And then I read the book 4 years ago. I read it almost immediately after it came out, and it's just like, you know, certain things speak to you. You just know. And I thought there were 2 incredible ingredients just in the story, that it was the most bizarre Hollywood story ever, unlike any other, right? Because Tommy Wiseau is unlike any other human being that's ever lived. Some say he's an alien from another planet.
Is he a human being?
Or that The Room is as if an alien came down to our planet and tried to like portray life as he understood it. But on the other hand, what Greg Sestero and Tom Bissell did in that book was so beautiful, because they made that bizarre story everybody's story. And it was my story. And as I realized, you know, reading the book, like, not only could I relate sort of in a general way as like an actor who, you know, came to Hollywood and then wasn't getting support from his parents and was working at McDonald's and had to, you know, struggle for a bit. Not only can relate in that way, I actually was in LA at the exact same time they were, and Greg Sestero was beating me out for parts. And then, actually when I played James Dean, I think there's a scene in the book that described where Tommy gets stuck in traffic, and it's all this traffic that's going to the Golden Globes. Really? And he gets really upset. He's like, I don't want to wait in this traffic. Golden Globe, whatever, you know. And it was the night that I won. For James Dean. Yeah. So
you're
like,
in that ballroom, and somewhere out there in traffic is the guy you're going to play.
Exactly.
Cursing.
So like, and then I approached them. I read the book, and I got in touch with Greg, and then I approached them. But it turns out that I was one of 2 people that Tommy wanted to play him. I was maybe his second choice. he wanted Johnny Depp, but I was his second choice, largely because I had played James Dean, and he watched that movie many times, and so in a weird way, it's like we were like drawn to each other. You know what I mean? Of all, you know, you have 2 people in your mind, and one of them comes out of the blue and is like, yeah, I want to do it. But in Tommy's world, he was probably like, yeah, of course. Like,
Right.
like, should I let James do it, or maybe I should wait because Johnny's probably going to knock any moment now. That's how Tommy's world works.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I've been waiting. Like, almost like he knew a movie was going to be made about his life. Like, yeah, you guys it took you 14 and a half years. Like, should have happened like 5 years ago.
Were you drawn to it as a director or an actor or both at the same time?
There were like three things I saw in my mind when I was reading the book. Was like, I have to tell this story. I do want to direct it. I think I know how, and I want to play Tommy. I relate to him. Like, even though on the surface maybe there's a lot of differences, underneath, I got it. Mm-hmm. And there are roles that you see as an actor, and you're just like, I know my way. I know that there's a way. I don't know all the details yet, but I know that I can get in there. And I felt that way. I felt that way about James Dean, and I felt that way about Tommy. And then I knew I wanted my brother to play Greg. That I loved him he was a great actor. He was a great actor, but also that we had the right dynamic for several reasons. That Greg and Tommy do have a friendship that is almost like they're brothers.
Yeah.
Strange brothers, but brothers. And that would be great to have my own brother. But also, we had done this series of sketches for Funny or Die, where I played this ridiculous acting coach, and he was my student. And that popped into my mind when I was reading it. It was like, basically that was the seed for the relationship in the room, because Tommy's a bizarre director and Greg's his actor.
When people see the movie, I think we all know it's going to be hilariously funny, which it is. I never use this term, but it is like you hurt yourself laughing. It's so funny. It is gut-punchingly. Anyway, it's really funny. But I think people are taken aback by how empathetic it is and how it is about dreams. And, in a weird way, like redefining what Hollywood success is. This guy gets to see his dream, and he's so sincere about it.
Yeah.
That it actually kind of breaks your heart. But
that's what we had to find.
Yeah.
And that's what they did so well in the book. And when I read the book, like if I had just gone to see The Room, I would have been like, oh, this is amazing. And if I went, the theatrical experiences are so fun and communal. But the most I could probably pull out of it would be some art project, because you wouldn't necessarily know from The Room all that amazing backstory.
Right.
You might be able to surmise, and I think audiences do get this feeling, whether it's subconscious or not, of, wow, this guy is really trying. Like there is, you can read into it and see, oh, he was trying to be sincere with this thing. And I think it's actually one of the things that sets The Room apart.
Yeah. They didn't set out to make a bad movie. Yeah.
Set out to make, a great dramatic movie that, people will be disturbed for 2 weeks after watching this movie that,
Tennessee Williams.
Yeah, Tennessee Williams level drama. And, but reading the book, I saw, and we all saw it, and that the way in was to make him sympathetic and to really tell the story of creativity. It would be, Tommy has the same level or he had the same level of passion as a young Coppola. You know what I mean? It's just that he had zero self-awareness. He thought he was James Dean. He looks like a pirate mixed with a vampire, and he thinks he's James Dean, and so. And so that's why that passion just gets filtered through this weird cheese grater of, and comes out over here, But I thought we will be able to, if we do it right, we'll be able to tell the story of all kind of artistic striving, of all outsiders, with a dream. It'll just be through this weird upside down lens. And yeah.
you also got two of the best screenwriters in the business.
Exactly.
Who,
And so, exactly. So
who, by the way, won the National Board of Review.
I know.
Best
Amazing. Yeah.
adapted
They're
screenplay
amazing.
yesterday. Yeah.
That sort of shows, hiring Scott Neustadter and Mike Weber kind of shows where we wanted to put our focus, because they're not necessarily comedic writers.
No.
They wrote 500 Days of Summer and Fault in Our Stars. And so it showed that we really wanted to put the emphasis on the relationship between Greg and Tommy.
They're the relationship guys.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so hiring them already put us in that direction. And then I learned like a month and a half ago that Mike Weber.
I was there.
Were you there? Yeah.
Yes.
He's like, I didn't even watch The Room before we wrote the first draft. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, Scott did. So we, one of us was aware of it, but we wanted to make sure that what we wrote would work for, people that weren't initiated into The Room.
It makes sense, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't tell if you were genuinely stunned by that, because you seemed to have trouble processing that night.
I was stunned. I sort of like.
You were like, really? Really?
I know. I was like. It worked. It worked. Whatever he did worked.
And the truth is, I have seen the Disaster Artist with people who haven't seen The Room, and it does work. And then there's still people, I know, you mentioned Actors on Actors, you were paired with Dustin Hoffman. He watched your movie and still didn't know The Room was a real movie.
Which is a little weird.
It is.
You wonder if he didn't get to the end. I'm like, I didn't want to say that. Dustin, did you watch the end? We do a side-by-side comparison.
I figured he figured it out by then, but maybe not. You might be right.
He was like, yeah. Well, we considered putting actual footage of Tommy up front.
Really?
Of our film, because people that hadn't seen The Room maybe would think, wow, James is really taking a big swing here. That is a choice, little over the top, James. Yeah. But we put it at the end, and so people realize, oh, he's not exaggerating.
No, not in the least.
That's the guy.
It's weirdly dead on, and in fact, I assume there had to be times where, because truth is so much stranger than fiction, did you have to hold back?
Yeah, well, what we did learn was Tommy's such a fun character, and he's such a fun character to do, and everybody sort of got into it by the end. And like I said, it was sort of a Judd Apatow set environment where Neustadter and Weber on set every day, writing alts, and we had other writers, Kelly Oxford and other people writing alts, and we'd come up with stuff, and everybody loved, coming up with Tommy's stuff so much. But then we realized, no, we can't go too far. It's not about playing the jokes; it's about playing the situations. And so there were a lot of Tommy-isms that we tried that we ultimately didn't put in, just because it just wasn't the thing. Yeah.
And you spent time with him, because I think did you have to get his life rights?
Yeah, I did spend time. I've spent a lot of time with him now at this point. He's amazing.
Yeah.
He's amazing in the sense that he's just surprises every time. But I'm getting to know him a little better. When we were preparing for it, I thought, I'm not going to be able to talk to him about who he was before The Room very much, because I'm not going to get a straight answer, because he is, the master at rewriting history. As unaware as he was when he was making The Room about, who he was, he's become inversely proportionally, a maverick at capitalizing on the comedic success of The Room. And he's taken on that persona, I intended to be comedy, like that. And so to talk to him about who he was and how sincere and earnest he was when he was making The Room now wouldn't serve me.
Right.
He'd be like, no, I intended to be. He even has at the beginning of The Room, if you go to the screenings now, it's one of the best things he's made since The Room. It's just this little video that goes before it's these little sayings, and then these explosions come up, and it's like, you say I didn't have script. How dare you? You say I don't intend it to be comedy. How dare you? You say I don't know what I'm doing. I have 35 millimeter camera and HD. How dare you? Say Tommy's stupid. It's like this insane thing. So like that's who he is now. Like if I went to him and be like, you were trying to be sincere. How dare you? Like that's basically what I get, right? And so I did have something else though that was of equal value. It would be as if I had interviewed him and talked to him before he made the room. And he, in Tommy fashion, did something weird. He used to record everything. He would record every phone conversation. And in the room, there's this scene where he's suspecting his girlfriend, of cheating on him, and he's like, I will record her every conversation, or whatever he says. And he goes to the phone, and he just happens to have like a mini tape or something in his pocket. Yeah. And you're like, what the heck? That's so stupid. But in fact, no, it makes total sense for Tommy Wiseau because that's what he did. He always had mini tapes because he was always recording everything. And so he would also drive around in his car with a mini tape recorder and record himself to talk to himself. And he had hundreds of these tapes. And 20 years ago, his good friend Greg, as good friends do, stole some of these tapes.
Oh my God.
Not knowing, this is before The Room, before, there's this, cult phenomenon, before his book, he just took some of these tapes. And he had digitized them, and when I was getting ready to play the role, Greg gave them to me. Wow. And they're incredible. I mean, when I was playing James Dean, I had heard about this teenage journal that he wrote that his nephew Marcus, who runs the estate, has and I think has never shown to anyone. These were as if I had the journal, but it was like not only that, it's like the audiobook version, read by the man himself. And he's like complaining about acting teachers, and it's everything I needed. It was like, he don't treat me like the other students will ever come down on me, tell me to like speak French, and like, why would I do that? Like, tell him that. And then, you know what? I think he intimidated. He sensed my power, and I think he just intimidated, treat me different. Maybe and this is 5 years before The Room. He's like, maybe I'll go do my own thing. Maybe I'll make movie, or maybe I join rock band and I make rock album or something. And with that, like right there, that little nugget, that's Tommy, in a nutshell, where the whole town tells him no, and he's like, and then you see him make the switch in his mind. He's like, well, they don't understand. I will show them. I will, make my own movie. And like I had little bits like that, or even others that were like actually really like touching and sad. Oh no! Now, he knows I have them. Yes. It's not. Yes. Yeah. He calls them secret tape. James, everybody asks me about secret tape. They know you have my secret tape. Like but for an actor, it was gold.
Yeah, of course. It was like, and I've harped on this before, but the physical transformation, because I mean it as a compliment when I say I wouldn't look at you and think that you would be the first person to play Tommy Wiseau, but like the makeup and the hair, and then, I mean, how long did it take you to get into the look? Yeah, 2.5 hours every day, and I was the director, so I had to get there before everyone. It wasn't like go set up and go to makeup. It was like, because they'd be waiting around for hours. So yeah, 2.5 hours every morning. We didn't know if it was going to work before, because we had, I'd done the interview with Seth in Point Grey, and in fact, doing Kim Jong-un, right, with Randall, they had put some prosthetics on. Really? And it looked kind of cartoony. So we ended up not using that, and so
so Point Grey was a little worried
Yeah.
about me using prosthetics, and so I had to. We did a test, and so I had cheeks, bridge on the nose, chin, eyelid, and wig. We were gonna do, because Tommy's got a pretty big forehead, but then it would have involved like going over my eyebrows and then putting fake eyebrows on, and we were like, all right, let's not do that one. Yeah, it was. It was important. It was important.
Yeah.
You know, it was. It was an interesting thing. You know, the actors talk about how I like stayed in character. You know, when I was directing. Now, here's the thing. Like, I had all that stuff on, and what you realize, you know, the amazing thing about playing like a role where you look so different, and Gary Oldman talked about this too. Like, people just treat you differently. You realize, oh, you know, it's just, I don't know, it's just automatic. We don't think about it. We just, you know, and people treat you differently. So we're already sort of treating me like Tommy. In a way.
Really?
Or like if I would meet, or like Seth Rogen's grandparents came, and they were like, they just did not know what was going on. They didn't know it was me. And then like Lauren, his wife, just hated it. She just did not like, yeah, she didn't talk to me for months because I was Tommy. But I sort of stayed in character, and you know, we were thinking about it. Sort of, we couldn't think of another example where the director of a movie was acting in it, playing a director acting in his own movie.
Wow, yeah.
And then on top of that, like staying in character when he directed. Like, we couldn't think of that ever happening. On the other hand, you know, there's this amazing, it's my new favorite thing, this amazing documentary on Netflix called Jim and Andy.
Yeah,
where
it's fantastic.
Jim, you know,
Yeah.
where it's all the footage of him playing Andy Kaufman, and he goes so deep into Andy Kaufman that Jim is gone, right? And you see he's just like, he's got Milos Forman there, like one of the best directors ever, who's like cowed by, like, you know, the Tony Clifton character, and like I didn't do that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It wasn't like The Disaster Artist was directed like The Room. You know, it wasn't, you know, like I'm giving Tommy direction like, you know, your sister, this is what he actually would, like, when you do auditions, like, your sister lesbian, she just died. Go. Like, that's his direct, like, everyone's like, fuck. You know, I did not do that. I directed like James. It was just sort of like through the filter of Tommy.
And I think when you're in that outfit, you almost can't help it.
Yeah.
But be Tommy.
It just made it simpler. I'm sure it was bizarro, you know, for most of the actors. But and like Seth on his first day, we had a lot of cameos, and when people would come to set, it would be a minute. I didn't know that this was going on. I learned later that the producers and other actors would be like, or my brother would be like, all right, so before you go to set, just so you know, like, James ain't gonna be there, and it's gonna be really weird, but whatever. And so yeah, it took some of the actors a little while, but I think it helped with the atmosphere, you know.
And I don't want to spoil anything again, but there is a nude scene of Tommy in the room that you have to reenact. Mm-hmm. And so I was watching this thinking, you know, you're running around set naked as Tommy Wiseau, while also directing yourself.
Look, let's just be clear, like that, we were, again, recreating what really happened. That wasn't like James saying, yeah, I gotta do this scene where I'm running around with a cocksock on. But if you know The Room, there are like 3 or 4 sex scenes within the first 30 minutes. Yes. And they're like the most ridiculous, frightening, goofy sex scenes that you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Not only that, Tommy was so enamored of, you know, with his sex scene that he repurposed the footage from one sex scene and made an additional sex scene like 10 minutes later. Like, you're not, like, he's not fooling anyone. It's like, isn't that the same scene from like, just slightly different moments, you know? And different music. But we, in our movie, so in the book, they talk about how when he was directing those scenes, he would walk around without a robe on and was like that all day.
Yeah. Wow.
If you're ever on a set like that, just run. The director is pulling that, just go.
Yeah.
I mean, if we've learned anything. But in our movie, it was a very important scene because it wasn't just showing how ridiculous and inappropriate that set was. In fact, the character is going through kind of a breakdown. And Tommy's worried that he's going to lose his best friend, so he's acting out on set, and it's actually a lot of self-hatred and fear that's going on, and he's just taking it out on his set. So it's sort of one of the climactic scenes, and tonally, it is the nucleus of our movie because it's funny and scary and sad and so many things are happening at one time. I planned it out with my DP Brandon Trost. He was amazing. Yeah. Beforehand, that we would shoot it. There's a few cuts in it, but we shot it as if with one shot, and so all the energy would keep building and stay high, and so we only really did it maybe 5 or 6 times.
Really?
I mean, it would just be like a mini one-act play. It would just go because go all over the set and all these different. There's different sections of that scene, and so my crew, the Disaster Artist crew, was only subjected to my partially nude body for only 5 or 6 takes.
I know we're almost out of time, but I want to get through some audience questions really quick. Speed round. We have a question from, is it Raphael? Doorbell? Oh, way back over there. What's the most challenging role you've had and why?
I think the character, you never want to judge your characters, when you're playing them, and so this is speed round. Sorry. Okay.
Oh no. Your vision of a speed round.
There's a movie called True Story that I did with Jonah Hill. It's based on this real guy who murdered his family, and he was the worst guy that I ever played, and the real guy is on death row, Christian Longo, and he wanted me to go and meet him, and I just thought, you know what, this guy has done nothing of note in his life except murder his kids and his wife. And I have him on video. I have his deposition. I have enough, and I don't want to give this guy any bragging rights or anything, and so I didn't go meet him. And then when I was playing him, like I said, you don't want to judge the character, but I found myself just hating him so much that I almost felt like I wasn't in character. I just wouldn't think about it. I just, I did all my preparation, but I just wouldn't even think about him. And then I realized it's exactly how he works. He's a sociopath, and he's so unaware of himself and what he's done that's exactly probably the state that he was in. But yeah, it was kind of hard to get through. It was hard for me and Jonah. He had a hard time on that movie too.
A question from, is it Manola? Manola. You film a lot of movies with your friends. Which film was the most fun to shoot?
They're all, all of them are fun. That was the lesson I learned on Pineapple Express, that you can make a movie with your friends, you can have a good time, and still make a good movie. And so all of them, they're all great. I remember on the set of This Is the End, while they're setting it up, we just hang out in that house. It's supposed to be my house. It's not my house. It was a set. Just laying on the bean bags and be sitting there with Danny McBride and be like, wow, it doesn't feel any different when we're off camera and on camera. It's this is just hanging out. And And so the Disaster Artist was the same way. It was
Yeah.
just, not only was it friends, it was family, my brother and my sister-in-law. And, so yeah, it was great.
Alizé, what are the things you wish you could still do that fame took away from you? And how do you deal with that? You know, privacy, freedom of speech.
That's a good question. I mean, it's a part of my life, and it's one of the things that I just had to, I've been in different ways sort of struggling with, sometimes not even knowing that I'm struggling with it, you know, because it's great, you know, there's great things, you know, and I'm so grateful for my career, and then you relate, you know, my relationship with it can get funny, you know, where you think like, I don't know, like, oh, I'll just have fun with my public persona or something, and then it's like, oh no, it's not, you're not having fun, like, that's actually how people are gonna read you now, like, that's how people consider you this way. You thought you were being frivolous and funny, and in fact, that's how people now read you. I don't know what I don't get to do. I mean, I've really tried hard to, as you can see, like going back to school and going to like multiple schools. Like I've really tried hard to have a life that, you know, is apart from that as well. So I don't know. I think I get to do everything.
But you're so busy always working.
Not anymore.
Like, really?
No.
You taking a break?
I only acted 2 weeks this whole year on a Coen
What?
Brothers thing,
You did a Coen Brothers thing?
yeah. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the Western.
When is that coming out? Did all that horse
year.
riding come in handy?
A
Finally?
little bit, yeah.
Oh, good.
A little bit. I don't want to ruin anything. It wasn't riding as much as there's a part where I have a noose around my neck.
Ooh.
And there's a horse that's under me and like a lot of activity going around me, and I kind of had to like, and the horse is supposed to get spooked and they'd have it like rear up and stuff, so took some, took some know-how to stay
Paid
on
off.
it. Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah.
When is that coming out, do you know?
I think next year.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And finally, a question from Cody Christensen. He wants to know, when was the last time you remember wanting to give up on the business? And what did you do to keep going? Did you drink both of these? Wow.
Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out, but I mean,
You have
like,
yours.
and a coffee.
Talk a lot. My long answers. I think right before I ran into Judd, about 12 years ago or so, whatever, right before Pineapple, I just, I was trying so hard and it was just, not working out. I just was not happy with a lot of the work I was doing and the experiences I was having. And it was largely due to me. I had to make that adjustment. That was the lesson I learned on Pineapple. But it wasn't fun, and I wasn't getting the results I wanted, and it just, whatever. And so that's when I went back to school, and that's when I did Pineapple. And that helped a lot. And then recently, I slowed down. I think, I was known for doing a lot of things, and part of that was that I had learned early on, when I was working at McDonald's, like, okay, James, nobody except your teacher is saying you should do this. You should take this chance on yourself. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna just believe in myself. I gotta work really, really hard. I gotta show everyone that I am supposed to be doing this. And then 2 or 3 years later, I was on Freaks and Geeks, and so I learned from that experience, like, oh, if you work hard at something, that's how you get better. Like any athlete, you know, if they are professional, they've practiced, right? You're not going to find anybody in professional sports that's like, nope, I never practice. I'm a natural, you know. Like people have natural talent, but they work at it, and so part of me, you know, directing so many things and doing all that was like, oh, I just want the experience in doing that. And, you know, a lot of those movies, I'm happy with most of them, but, you know, some are more successful than others in different ways. But a lot of that was, I think, getting experience. And, you know, I get to direct on The Deuce now, and I don't think I would have been able to direct an HBO show, especially for David Simon, if I didn't have all that experience behind me, and I wouldn't have been able to make the movie I made if I didn't have that. But in addition, the change that I had to make was, and the other thing that was going on though was that I was just running from myself. And any actor and any creative person, I believe, you know, now in hindsight, like you have to, you know. In addition to like what I was getting was, you know, all the sort of practical know-how and, you know, and just learning all the mechanics of it and getting all that down. But I wasn't balancing it out with a life and balancing out who I was. And so I was, in some ways, not growing, not maturing, because I just was letting my real life sort of like dwindle. It was almost like I was like this, you know, emaciated, like, being at the center of this other thing that was my career, and so now I'm learning. You know, I had to learn how to balance everything out, and then the result. You know, I think the results show, and I feel so much better about my work. Just slowing down now, and now that I have all that experience under my belt, and giving more time and focus to fewer things.
And I'm so excited that Disaster Artist is finally opening this weekend, because my friends are sick of hearing me talk about it and spoil it for them, because they really want to see it on their own. But could you, as Tommy, tell us why we should go see this movie?
Okay. Well, how long you want?
I think you have to be somewhere, actually,
Okay.
so it's up to you.
As Tommy said at the premiere of his movie, The Room, this also applies to me, James, as my movie, The Disaster, comes out, because as I've tried to talk about, this was a very personal story for me, even though on the surface, in some ways it's very different. It was incredibly personal. And so as Tommy said, I will say, this my movie, this my life. Be cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys.